This is the community of Swan Keys, built on a saltwater tidal marsh called Derrickson Creek. It's a coastal community in lower Sussex County, Delaware. Built in the early 70s, Swan Keys was laid out before the advent of stormwater management in Sussex County. If you look above and below Swan Keys, you'll notice the surrounding communities. The arrows are pointing to the Refuge and Bayview shores. Being built are at a 2-foot higher elevation, making Swan Keys more at risk for flooding. Densely built, there are 606 properties and over 575 homes on 7 streets. Remarkably, Swan Keys has survived over the years despite being densely hardscaped with roof lines, tight housing, and extensive paving. This is the Dirksen Creek watershed that extends west to east from Route 113 to the Atlantic coast. The watershed was formed over the last 150 years by draining the Great Cypress Swamp through a process known as ditching. In 1956, this process was codified by the Soil Conservation Service to drain flood-prone areas for farmland. Dirksen Creek gets most of its water from the tax ditches and the groundwater that seeps into it. You can see Swan Keys on the south side of the creek across from the Little Assawoman Wildlife Area. Notice the blue arrow. After heavy rains, Dirksen Creek carries extensive runoff from the surrounding farmlands. Stormwaters contain heavy amounts of poultry litter used as fertilizer on agricultural areas. Additionally, residential communities use grass fertilizers that also contribute to a high nitrogen and phosphorus count in this tidal creek. The sediment you see in this picture is carried by tides into the canals of Swan Keys. Because of this ditching, fertilizing process, the creek has little ability to filter or clean its own waters. Underwater grasses have died back, shellfish are compromised, and there is low oxygen in the water and high counts of bacteria known as Enterococcus. Fish and shellfish consumption advisories have become the norm because the Enterococcus and Vibrio contamination that can cause vomiting, diarrhea, and rare cases, even death. The following is a dialogue for the selected slides from Swan Key's Square Lagoon Living Shoreline by Doug Janiak, Sovereign Solutions, Bob Collins of CIB, and Larry Trout of RK&K. Swan Keys is a canal front community on Dirksen Creek. Sediments flows into the canal and this lagoon on Laws Point Road. Tidal action is minimal. Like all the canals in Swan Keys, it regularly experiences algae blooms caused by low dissolved oxygen with murky waters, heavy sediment, and little aquatic plant life. The lagoon can't support wildlife, fish, or crabs, and is prone to large clusters of jellyfish in the summer. Residents do not swim or fish to eat in the canals or lagoon for health reasons. This is an example of what happens over time when a bulkhead is installed. Wildlife and underwater grasses disappear in the water because there's no natural connection between the shoreline and the water. The water becomes murky. Erosion will eventually occur behind the bulkhead, making for an additional danger for humans and animals to walk in the area. This is an artist rendition of a living shoreline. As you can see, there's an increase in aquatic reed grasses, fish, shellfish, turtles that all help build up the dissolved oxygen in the water and contribute to a better water quality. In a storm, wave action dissipates as the sloped shoreline absorbs the force of the storm water. The bulkhead on Swan Keys Lagoon is failing. As you can see, erosion has exposed the silt fabric. Sinkholes have appeared behind the bulkhead, in numerous places, and the wood is rotting. On the Laws Point side, at the upper left, large weeds have grown through the bulkhead and into the water. This overhead picture shows the clean lines of the bulkhead on the lagoon. The drop-off from the grassed edge into the water is 5 to 6 feet deep, and there are no ladders or other methods to help an individual climb out of the water. At the September 2016, the Board of Directors discussed a low bid offer of $19,700 to tear out and replace 152 feet of bulkhead on the Laws Point side of the lagoon. Notice the blue line, that's the 152 feet. As an alternative, before the October 2016 Board of Directors meeting, a presentation was made by the Center for Inland Bays. They offered to install a living shoreline on two sides of the lagoon, Laws Point and Activities Way, for a total of 352 feet. If you look at this picture closely, you will notice that in this offer, the living shoreline grasses will be installed in a straight line, resembling the effect of a linear bulkhead without the negative consequences. In other words, the clean lines of the bulkhead would be maintained in this design. The canvas back roadside of the lagoon would be kept as a bulkhead for boat tie-ups. The engineering diagram for RK&K. This is RK&K's engineered cross-section design showing number 1 where the oyster castles are on concrete, number 2 the core logs, and lastly the saltwater vegetation called spartina. These native grasses grow 1.5 to 2 feet tall. Above the waterline, the same grasses would be installed on a gentle slope. Notice the green arrow next to it. Leading into the turf grass on the upper slope, the red arrow, next to it. The maintenance cost would be limited to weeding once or twice a year. Phragmites, the tall invasive grasses found around bays, would not be able to take hold because they require a flatter slope. Mowing the upper area, would still have to be done, but the square footage of this area would be smaller by installing filament wire across the vegetated strips. Geese would not be able to land or nest. I know. Why am I beating around the bush? Just get to the important stuff. What's the cost? Glad you asked. The Swan Keys Living Shoreline is a one-time cost of $10,000, an amount that is already in the 2016 budget. So remember, we don't currently have enough bulkheading money in this year's budget to even replace the short side of the 152 feet on Laws Point, because it would cost us $19,700. We'd have to appropriate another $9,700. Now you ask, are living shorelines cheap to install? The answer is no. This is a demonstration project for the Center of Inland Bays, where they can use pictures, video, lectures to show what can be done to clean up the canal waters in Delaware. If you look at the first two columns headed Expenses and Grant Match, you will see that this is all outside money provided to us. Through a combination of Delaware state grants, they are able to offer us $81,000. If we can match their money with $10,000 from Swanke's budget, that's a 9-to-1 match. The only thing that CIB asks is that we allow them to use our community center to train marine contractors in Sussex County 2 times a year. And at the end of their brief training session, the CIB would walk the marine bulkhead contractors out to our living shoreline and see it in the flesh. Swan Keys would be at the head of the nationwide movement to clean up saltwater canals by replacing bulkheads and living shorelines, and we would say we did it for 1/9 of the cost. Remember, bulkhead has to be replaced every 30 to 50 years. A living shoreline never has to be replaced, and ours would be guaranteed by the CIB and only cost our community $10,000 to install. The cost of replacing the entire 500 feet of bulkhead at today's prices would be $67,500. That's money we don't have. Each property owner in good standing will be able to vote on the Living Shoreline project at the annual meeting in May of 2017. If you can't attend, you may send your ballot back by mail to the address indicated on the packet. If you want more information, there is an hour-and-a-half presentation by the CIB, Sovereign Solutions, and RK&K Engineering on our website and on Nextdoor Swan Keys. The presentation is approximately 35 minutes long, and the rest is Q&A with residents and CIB representatives. If you have further questions, please contact Sharon, Susie, Tom, and Bob. Thanks for listening, and be sure to vote.